brave, or are they risking alienating our biggest, strongest ally in the Middle East?
Well, good morning, Eamon and Isabel. It depends who you listen to. Certainly, this has been controversial. Worth saying, I think, straight away, it's only 30 out of 350 arms exports licences that have been suspended. And the UK only supplies some 0.02% of Israel's weapons, which is a tiny, tiny fraction. Of course, nothing like the United States, who have threatened to suspend supply of weapons. But of course, that has not happened. But yes, David Lammy has said, look, we're following on from a review which was instigated by the Conservative government and trying to unpick, whether or not weapons or weapon components, because a lot of these are components, things that are used in fighter aircraft, helicopters and drones, etc., and components in weapons used for hitting targets on the ground, is exceptionally difficult, but they think there is a clear risk. So that's why they have done this. I think worth saying that it's significant, isn't it? Because this is a departure not only from the position of the previous Conservative government, but also from America. In opposition, Labour sat very tightly in agreement pretty much with whatever Rishi Sunak said, whatever they said in the States. So this is suggesting a slight shift. And of course, it comes off the back of Britain has now restarted giving aid to the UN Relief Agency, where it had suspended aid over concerns with links to Hamas. And also it's dropped its challenge to the International Criminal Committee arrest warrants for Israeli leaders. So there's certainly more scepticism. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, very keen to stress that he still supports Israel's right to defend itself and the right for a two-state solution. Plenty in Labour, of course, on the left of the party, saying that this doesn't go anywhere near far enough. And of course, it comes at an incredibly difficult time, given the deaths of the 6 hostages at the weekend, given the protests on the streets of Israel and the very, very difficult position that Benjamin Netanyahu finds himself in domestically as well as internationally.
Thank you very much indeed. Britain will suspend 30 of 350 arms export licences with Israel.
Yeah, this was a shock announcement yesterday from the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. He said he was deeply worried by Israel's conduct in Gaza. Here's what he said in Parliament.
For certain UK arms exports to Israel, there does exist a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law.
And the former Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, said in response to that the suspension was like student politics and a gut punch amounting to a punishment for Israel.
Well, let's speak now to the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, Gary Mond. Good morning to you. We've had some pretty widespread condemnation from certain circles, including this morning the UK chief rabbi, who says it beggars belief. Boris Johnson has also come out saying, why are Alami and Starmer abandoning Israel? Do they want Hamas to win? And even Labour's friends of Israel have said they're concerned by the signal that this sends to Israel's enemies. What's your own view this morning?
It is absolutely appalling that the United Kingdom wishes to treat one of its major allies in this way. Israel needs those weapons. And also one has to think of how Israel is going to respond to this decision. I don't know what Benjamin Netanyahu is going to do, but don't forget the vast number of arms that Israel is supplying to the UK, particularly with the use of its war in Ukraine. It's quite possible that Israel might choose to react in a way that the United Kingdom does not like. I think that this decision...
Meaning what, Gary? Meaning what?
meaning that Israel will stop supplying arms to the UK. This goes in both directions, you know. In fact, Israel supplies far more arms to the UK than the UK does to Israel.
You see,
Can
Gary,
you imagine what would happen if Israel stopped supplying vital equipment to the UK, which is used in Ukraine?
Yeah, well, as you say, it could very well happen. The thing is, the farcical thing about this situation is that all weapons can be used in a bad way. It doesn't matter what the weapon is. I mean, if it can kill, it can kill, and we don't have to agree on the way it kills people for it to be wrong. It's why Britain goes and says, well, you can have this one that can kill people, you can have this one that can kill people, but you can't have that one. That's what I find a bit ridiculous about this.
It's a condition of arms sales that they have to be able to prove it hasn't been in breach of international law. And this was the results of a review that was commissioned by Rishi Sunak, and the results have come back and meant they've had to change the legal parameters. It's interesting, Lord Ricketts this morning, a well-respected international British diplomat, has said this is actually about protecting the integrity of the UK's arms trade.
I don't buy that. We're in a war situation. Israel is an ally of the United Kingdom. Israel is seeking to eradicate Hamas, which is a threat not just to Israel, but to Jews everywhere. And to do so, it will need weapons. There is a war going on, in case one hasn't noticed.
Would it be worth Israel changing its position and allowing international observers or journalists into Gaza? Because that's been one of the problems, hasn't it? That they're not able to have evidence beyond any reasonable doubt that these weapons have been used in breach of international law. Well, if we could have observers, that would rule that problem out. The sales could resume if it was all above board. No,
the weapons are being used to fight a war. We're seeking to eradicate the Hamas terrorists. And if some civilians unfortunately lose their lives during this process, that's what happens in a war. Did we have international observers when Britain was bombing Nazi Germany with a view to ending Adolf Hitler's regime? Of course we didn't. This is absolute nonsense. What is required is for Israel to win this war.
There'll be people jumping up and down listening to you here, and they'll be saying, really, the amount of attacks there's been on schools, on children in hospitals. There's just been too many.
There are no attacks on children or schools and hospitals.
Well, a lot of children have died and a lot of hospitals have been hit.
They're not targeting civilians. They're targeting terrorists. You realise that the Hamas terrorists take over the schools and hospitals.
Are you actually saying that these children haven't died?
I'm not saying they haven't died. I'm saying they've been caught up in the crossfire. And the reason they're there is to protect Hamas terrorists. They're there to make it look terrible that Israel is targeting the terrorists and the children are being used.
Well, it's certainly succeeding, isn't it? It's succeeding in making it look terrible, and this is why you've got a problem.
It is making Israel look terrible, but its first priority is to eradicate Hamas. That's what the Israeli government is seeking to do and has been seeking to do.
Well, they had this twin strategy, eradicate Hamas and also to negotiate the release of the hostages, but they seem to be putting one strategy ahead of the other, which is this eradication of Hamas. And then we've had this awful situation, haven't we, in the last few days, where so close to the handover of some more hostages, they were tragically executed in cold blood by Hamas at the last minute. Yeah. But President Biden has come out and just yesterday said that Israel could do more to try and reach some sort of ceasefire. Do you accept that kind of intervention? They are your biggest ally, Israel's biggest ally.
I'm not sure what President Biden means by Israel could do more. The pressure needs to be put on Hamas. There is a red line concerning the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border between Gaza and Egypt, whereby Hamas has been smuggling weapons for years, which has enabled them to commit the atrocities on the 7th of October last year. Benjamin Netanyahu is absolutely firm that there will be no negotiation, as far as he's concerned, on the Philadelphia corridor, and Israeli troops must remain there. And I fully understand and accept that position.
OK.
His position, of course, if he does agree to negotiations, Gary, he's out of a job. He's out of government, isn't he?
Not necessarily. He has got certain principles and he will accept the deal if those principles are upheld. And I think his government would as well. No, so I don't think he's out of a job. And regarding the massive demonstrations in Israel that one's witnessing against Netanyahu, there are two sides to the coin. There's a lot of support for him. Unfortunately, the state of Israel is split down the middle as to whether they support the idea of paying virtually any price to get the hostages freed on the one hand, on the other hand, standing firm and putting the future of Israel first, because that is what the Netanyahu government is doing at the moment. They don't want to see another 7th of October. Look at all the soldiers who've lost their lives in fighting this war. They will have died in vain if we just allow Hamas to reoccupy the Philadelphia corridor and take over full control of Gaza as they had before.
Gary, thanks for your take on things and adding that dimension to the whole debate today. It is not easy to find a solution, and that opens up a whole talking point for us this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
So emotive. He's the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, Gary Mond there.